We won't be able to see that, will we?
The YouTube streaming when it goes? No, you shouldn't be able to see it. Because they'll be seeing this now.
So it says Nelson, there's two up. Nelson Appel's personal meeting room. Two streams. I'm doing the welcome.
All right, so one of them's live right now. So yeah, there's a double image up there.
Should I start?
So we're kind of, let's see, it's 7:02. Let's see here, 3 watching now. I assume that's including me. So
Well, let's wait a minute or two.
just okay. And I just know from the way these things go, right? You know, when people log in, you have to allow a few extra minutes at the beginning of Zoom meetings and things for people to start getting themselves where they need to be. I'm gonna see if. Let's see. I'm gonna mute myself here for a moment.
Bill, are you using just a virtual background, or do you have a green screen as well?
Oh, that's a picture, a photograph of our backyard, actually. Oh,
But it's just done through the computer. It's not a green screen.
right, it's just done
Okay.
through the computer.
Okay. I'm going to start experimenting with green screen technology because I want to do some virtual sets, because I'm drama director and we're doing some plays
Oh, yeah.
that are done in virtual form, and we want to be experimenting with that so we can make it look like people are in the same room when they're actually in different, houses and that sort of thing. So
Yeah, I'm not that techie yet.
neither am I. That's why I was asking. But I have to become that techie.
I know, we are really learning, aren't we? Whew.
You have to remember that I'm in a monastery. For me, high tech is a pen that's got a roller ball on it, right?
Uh-huh, yeah.
I just, noise pollution is having shoes that squeak,
Okay, so at this point, we've got 11 now watching
Okay.
us. So people are
Okay.
finding their way on. They'll probably
Okay,
be
great.
joining. That seems to be the way this works. So welcome to everyone out there coming to Washington Public Library's first live program over their new YouTube channel. And I'm Nelson Appel, the director of the library. I'm joined by Bill Schwab, a member of the Friends of the Library, used to be as a past president. And Bill has been organizing this series, and we can't thank him enough for all the effort he puts into this. So I'm going to turn it over to Bill Schwab, who can do introductions of our speaker tonight.
Thank you, Nelson. On behalf of the Friends of the Washington Public Library, Neighborhood Reads, and the Friends of the Library, as well as the library staff, I want to welcome you all tonight to this program, to this author event, as we've been calling them. Tonight, we're delighted to have Father Dominic with us to share some things about holiday baking. I think it's interesting that one of the things he's going to talk about is Hanukkah, and tonight is the first night of Hanukkah. And soon it will be Christmas and then Kwanzaa. So I want to thank him for doing this for us, and I'll turn it over to him for the program.
Okay, welcome everybody to the program, and thank you for tuning in. I have been driven slightly mad by not being able to do bread demonstrations. I had surprised myself by discovering that it is my primary form of entertainment on weekends. And when I was unable to do it, I started baking up a storm at home, which no one ever complains about, believe me. Or doing all those someday projects. I bet you all had that experience, you know, where you cleaned out your closets or did that one craft thing or repaired that thing. We did all that in the monastery as well. But I'm really happy to be doing some of these Zoom programs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be presenting something about holiday baking. We're going to do Hanukkah jelly donuts. It is the first night of Hanukkah. I'll talk a little bit about the origin of the festival and why fried foods are featured. Then we'll do something about the origins of Kwanzaa, since a lot of people are not familiar with that, and then a recipe that one can make for that holiday or for really any holiday. It makes use of leftover sweet potatoes. You can use them fresh or leftovers. And then I'll go through a series of different breads that are kind of be like, that could be a centerpiece on a Christmas table kind of throughout the holiday season, all the way up until Epiphany. We'll look at some Epiphany breads as well. Throughout the course of this, I will be stopping periodically to see if anybody has a question. You're going to be able to put your questions in the comments on the YouTube channel that you're looking at right now. And then Nelson will ask those questions for you, and then I'll respond to them as best I can. I'm happy to take questions in the middle of things. If you've got something that's fairly urgent, that you're like, that thing on the screen right now, I'm used to being interrupted in Zoom with my own students. It's okay. I've been teaching Zoom since March. So I tell them, yeah, go ahead and interrupt me. It's okay. In class, it's a little different, but you know, in Zoom, when I can't see you because I'm on another screen, it's okay to kind of shout out. So we'll take questions throughout the program, and then afterwards, if you have questions about holiday baking in general, not just about the recipes that I show you or a problem that you've had with bread baking, as a lot of people are getting back into it, I'd be happy to answer those questions too. You don't need to take any notes on the recipes, because when the program is over, the recipes, the links to the recipes online will be found on the library's webpage. Okay, and so we'll have links there where you can go to the recipes on my website, another person's website who has a great tutorial for these Hanukkah jelly donuts, and then also where you can get my cookbooks and other things like that. Join me on Facebook and my Pinterest and all that kind of thing. So those links will be available to you after the program. Okay, but in the meantime, I'm going to go to my I'm going to switch screens and go to my PowerPoint presentation, and we'll go through little by little, step by step, and then we'll get to the end of the program. We can chat a little bit more about baking. So give me just a moment. I'm getting way better at this, you know, with teaching. I feel like I should be taking attendance too and entering grades while I'm doing this, but I won't. Okay. So here we go. Most of you, let's go back to that screen. This is from many, many years ago, because my beard is much darker. But I did a Christmas program for a PBS station many, many years ago, and that's kind of that is the sort of baking I do during the holidays. That is exactly what you will see on a monastery kitchen, because I do that kind of baking. I will go through literally a pound, maybe a pound and a half of yeast between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So I'm a great proponent of every kind of baking there is. Now, a lot of you are used to seeing me and looking like this, okay, with a really clean shaven head and a neatly trimmed goatee, instead of looking like this guy, which in the morning when I look in the mirror, I look like a homeless person. But in this case, it's because later on, I'm going to look like this, okay? I'm working my way towards playing Santa, Father Christmas, at a couple of Zoom events for various people. So that's why I've been growing the beard since March, actually. This is my pandemic beard. But I have a great deal of fun doing that sort of thing. We're going to talk first about Sufganiyot, which are Hanukkah jelly donuts, a very traditional food to be served on Hanukkah. But first, it's good for people to know, well, what are the origins of Hanukkah and why donuts? Okay. Hanukkah is, of course, the festival of lights. It's an 8-night festival. It celebrates the rededication of the temple in Jerusalem following the nation of Israel being conquered by Antiochus IV, who tried to impose pagan culture on the nation, including the worship of alien gods, and who put a statue of Zeus in the temple. It was the abomination of abominations. And so there was a revolt that was led, a successful revolt that was led by Judas Maccabeus and his sons, who then conquered the invading army, drove them out, and then they rededicated the temple and once again lit the 7-branched lampstand and resumed worship in the temple. But because it was a time of war, they did not have a sufficient amount of oil to burn the lamp for more than one night. They only had enough oil for a single night. There were not candles then, this was oil lamps. And miraculously, the lamps burned for 8 nights in a row. And so because of the miracle of the oil, that's why Hanukkah involves the tradition of the lighting of the menorah, 1 candle per night. The center candle, which is the helper candle, is the one that lights all the others. That's why there's 9 in a menorah. It's also a traditional time to play the dreidel game, and it is also a day to make foods fried in oil. Okay, because of the miracle of the oil, foods fried in oil became associated with the Hanukkah tradition. Now, principally among these are latkes, which are shredded potatoes mixed with scallion and sometimes with some egg and sometimes herbs. Just if you're eating kosher, no cheese. If you aren't eating kosher, then sometimes cheese is included. But it makes they're wonderful. That the whole house smells when you make latkes. Certainly, it's quite a delightful aroma. Certainly, any kind of fried potato I'm in favor of. But the other tradition is to make these Sufganiyot, which are a fried jelly donut. Now, jelly donuts, donuts in general, these little fried pies, were originally savory. They were not sweet. And the only thing that made it possible for sweets to come into common use was, of course, the slave trade, which made sugar cheap enough for people to be able to purchase. So with the New World and the slave trade that was in the New World, that had an economic change, which also brought about a cultural change and a culinary change. And so sugar being cheaper, then people started using them to make these fried sweets. It was also considered kind of a patriotic thing in Israel to go to Jewish bakeries, and they wanted to have some kind of special food that would be appropriate for the holiday, that kind of would be culturally everyone would enjoy. And so the Sufganiyot kind of became popular everywhere. If you go to Jerusalem now, you'll find them all over on every street corner. I mean, they just available everywhere. Thanks be to God, in every possible flavor. Now, there's one piece of kitchen equipment you must have to make Sufganiyot, and one piece of kitchen equipment that just makes things easier. Okay, what you must have is a fryer. Now, this is a big commercial fryer, actually in Jerusalem, by the way, in which they're making huge amounts. And I have a fryer that's smaller than that, but pretty substantial. You don't need anything as fancy as that. You can do this in an ordinary stock pot with a heavy bottom. You can fry in one of these Le Croisette enamelware things, okay, like a Dutch oven. You can use a deep skillet, a cast iron skillet, especially those kinds that you can roast a chicken in. Those are ideal for that sort of thing because of the way they hold the heat. But whatever you use, if you're using stovetop, you want to make sure you get a candy thermometer so that you can make sure that the oil stays at the right temperature. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. However, you can use electric fryers, which have the advantage of you being able to set the temperature exactly, and it will keep it at that temperature with the thermostat. So you can use even something like this little Fry Daddy here, or you can get yourself one of these electric skillet fryers, I have one like this. I don't think it's a Presto. I think it's a different brand, but I have one like this. And again, it has an electric dial on it that you can set the temperature exactly. However, the one that I have doesn't have temperature. It just has numbers. And so I have to set my dial to 4.5. So when you do yours, it would be good to get yourself a temperature. I mean, get yourself a thermometer and make sure your oil is at the correct temperature. Now, the other piece of equipment you want to have is something to put the filling inside the donut. You could simply open them up with a paring knife and put it in with a tiny spoon, but that's really tiresome. They make these special tips that go on a pastry bag, the kind that you use to fill a cupcake, and those are really common these days. There's also this kind, which is specifically designed for jelly donuts and eclairs. Those are a little harder to find. But this one, which was available at Walmart for a whopping $2.39, comes with 2 disposable pastry bags as well. This is what I bought the first time I made it, and it works great. So I recommend that if you don't really necessarily want to get into this professionally, get this inexpensive thing and you'll be able to use it. Okay. So before we get to the recipe itself, anybody with a question about all of that?
I don't have any questions so far, but I
Okay.
do have Chris Garamone says he is watching from Denver.
That's my cousin. That's my cousin. And my cousin, by the way, has one of those cast iron chicken roaster skillet things that he saw at the Goodwill before I saw it, and that's why he owns it and not me. Okay, so I just happened to think of that one. So that's great that he's tuned in, because I have seen that on his stove and it makes me mad that I don't own it. Okay, let's talk about the recipe. The dough itself, and I will send you a link to a website with an excellent Sufganiyot recipe by an actual Jewish baker, Tori Avey. She's outstanding, and everything she does is very authentic and carefully researched. And so I thought, she knows more than me. I'm just going to let you guys follow her directions. Notice how wet the dough is. If you've made bread before, you know that it doesn't do that. You know, it pulls away from the sides and it comes into a clump and it gets smooth and elastic. No, it stays very, very wet. The other thing that you notice is that, or you don't know it from here, but you would know from a video, when you cut the donuts out, rather than just pressing down and pulling up like you do for biscuits, when you do biscuits, you push down, you pull up. You don't want to twist too much, because if you twist too much, you seal the edges and then they won't flake up. They won't get as poofy and flaky when you bake them. This one, you do the twisting action because you seal the sides a little bit so that they will rise up as a round little pillow of deliciousness. So that's just a little technique thing. She recommends that you keep the temperature at 325 to 340. Most recipes will tell you 350 or to 370, even all the way to 375. That seems to me to be too hot, and she thinks so too, because it will get brown on the outside and be underdone on the inside. Okay, and so she says 325 to 340. 325, you don't want to get any below that, or else it's your donuts are going to be oily. They will soak up the oil as opposed to actually cooking. So you don't want to get below 325. But I kept mine between 325 and 340 and had great results. And exactly 90 seconds per side. I find that a little 2.5 inch cookie cutter, just a round cookie cutter or biscuit cutter, is perfect. 2.5 inches. Because then it's a little tiny donut and you don't feel bad about eating one. You know, 3 bites and you're done. You wouldn't mind trying 2 different flavors and you wouldn't feel bad about it. A lot of donuts that we get today, you know, you order a Danish somewhere, it's the size of a catcher's mitt. You feel horrible afterwards, you know, like you feel bad that you even ate it. This is just a little tiny delight thing, and you don't feel so bad. I feel as though it's the perfect size. 2 to 2.5 inches is perfect. Okay. You're going to drain them on paper towels and let them cool at least slightly. Now notice here, I want to see these. You see these striations here on the top of the dough. That's because the dough dried out just a little bit while it was rising, because it's a long rise. Most rises take, what, 35, 45 minutes at the most? This may take way more than that, simply because the dough is so rich. It's got so much sugar, so many eggs, that in fact it's going to take a much longer time to rise, and that's okay, and it's still working, and you needn't worry that you've blown it. Okay, do make sure you're using fresh yeast, however. But that striation is going to get covered up with the powdered sugar anyway. But the other thing is that when the top dries out slightly, it means the oil doesn't soak in. So it's actually to your advantage. I found it. I think I got a better product. Okay. So if you do your filling from the top, that's traditional for Sufganiyot. You do it from the side if you were making Polish paszkis, of course. And sometimes people will fill them from the side, but the top seems to be the traditional. Tori suggests that you use an ordinary drinking straw to open up the top a little bit and make a little space inside. And that seemed to work rather nicely for me, although do be careful you don't poke a hole in the bottom. And then you use something for the filling. Now, I just use an ordinary squeeze bottle, like an old ketchup bottle. This one actually is, I bought it empty and clean to put the filling in. Any jelly or any jam or preserve will do. You don't actually use jelly, or I don't. I prefer jam or preserves. But if you're going to use raspberry or strawberry, you might want to run it through a sieve so it gets smooth, and to break up the fibers, and also to get rid of the seeds so you're not biting into seeds and you've got a smooth filling. The other way to get around that, and this is what I did with these particular ones, I took strawberry pie filling and ran it through the food processor until the seeds were actually chopped up and it was smooth. And the other advantage to that, it's not as sweet as jam or preserves. And sometimes, you know how a jelly donut is a little too sweet, it's a little too much? Using this pie filling really makes a difference, and I think it works out great. You squeeze the bottle until the filling starts to come out from the top, and then you quit, okay? And then they're just sprinkled with powdered sugar. And as you sprinkle it with powdered sugar, then the jelly will eventually melt the powdered sugar, and you get that little cute thing on the top. People use strawberry and apricot commonly. Chocolate has become a popular flavor in recent years, of course, although that's non-traditional. You could fill it with any kind of pastry cream you wanted to, although it's fruit jellies are really kind of the traditional thing that you fill them with. I do like making cream puffs and jelly donuts and other things like that, but also with a cream filling. And a lot of times I'll do that by making a batch of pudding, instant pudding. But instead of using the recommended 2 cups of milk, I'll use a single cup of milk, so it's extra concentrated and heavy. Then I'll take whipped cream, freshly whipped, real, actual whipped cream, with a little bit of powdered sugar mixed in, and then fold the 2 together and use that as a filling. You've got a light filling, but with a strong banana or chocolate flavor or vanilla flavor. It's a great filling for any kind of eclair or for cream puffs or this kind of donut as well. Okay.
And that sounds delicious, because sorry to interrupt, but I know that heavy fillings is often a problem for me. I like them a little lighter.
When you get that Bavarian cream that just seems like it's just made of pudding and nothing else, I just can't stand it. Yeah. So it's a much lighter thing. If you take the pudding, make it twice as strong, but then mix in actual whipped cream. If you use Cool Whip, the angels will weep for you. I'm telling you. But if you use actual whipped cream and fold the 2 together, best filling for cream puffs I've ever made. In fact, I made that not long ago. I used vanilla pudding, and then I added a vanilla cheesecake filling and a pudding, and then added espresso powder to it. And I made essentially a cream puff that tasted like tiramisu. Had a ganache on the top. Yeah, the monks they about peed their habits. I'm telling you, it was one of the best things I've ever made. They were awesome. So, anybody with a question about the jelly donuts or anything else that has to do with fried foods or any of those kinds of questions?
Not yet, but Lisa says hello from Peoria.
Okay. That's my sister. Well, that's really awesome. Man, my whole family's checking in. This is great. It's kind of like Sunday Mass, too. Like, they all tune in on Sunday Mass as well. I waved him at the end of Mass. All right, let's move on to another recipe here. Kwanzaa and a fruited sweet potato bread, which I just find utterly irresistible and a great way to use up leftover sweet potatoes, which a lot of times we have after Thanksgiving. Sweet potatoes are also traditionally served at Kwanzaa. You might serve them at Christmas. Sometimes they go with your ham at Easter. This is an excellent recipe to use up those leftovers, which are usually not so great the next day in the microwave. Now, Kwanzaa is a relatively new holiday, although it has ancient origins and has a lot of traditional African elements, but its invention really is fairly new. In 1966, a Black activist named Malana Karenga wanted to have a holiday to help unite and empower African Americans, especially after the Watts riots. And so he chose the title of this festival and many of the things that go with it from a Swahili harvest festival, and took the name Kwanzaa, which is from the Swahili phrase Matunda ya Kwanzaa, which means first fruits. And I think this is very charming. He added the extra A on the end of the word Kwanzaa because he had 7 children, not he himself personally, but there were 7 children who wanted to be involved in the ceremonies of the first year that they had this celebration. And he wanted to have a letter to assign to each child. And so he wanted to make sure that from the very beginning, children were very much involved in this festival. And I think that's just a terrific thing, a real delight and a good way to get children enculturated into their own history. It's traditionally a harvest festival, and very often the tables are beautifully decorated with various fruits of various kinds. And as a result, the tables are often gorgeous. There's beautiful pictures of Kwanzaa on the internet if you want to look that up. It is a cultural holiday rather than a religious feast, and lots of people celebrate both Kwanzaa and Christmas. He was not trying to create something to replace Christmas. He wanted a holiday celebration that could celebrate African American culture, Black culture, in a way that was positive and family oriented and affirmed the things that he wanted in his community, whether or not somebody came from a Christian background or not. And even if they did, they could celebrate both things. Kwanzaa centers around 7 principles, which are represented by the 7 candles that you see on the tables there, 3 green, 3 red, and 1 black. Those qualities are unity, self-determination, collective work and responsibility, cooperative economics, purpose, creativity, and faith. And you can see how these are all elements. If you had a really active community, African American community, or of any cultural background, where your community was united and had a common purpose and had believed in cooperative economics and creativity and wanted to come together in unity, these are positive qualities that you would want in any community. And so I think it's a terrific choices that they made in order to emphasize these things throughout the holiday. Because it is a harvest festival, I chose this recipe because it uses a lot of ingredients, okay? And so it seems like there's a lot here, but that's precisely what you do for Kwanzaa. You load the table with, especially fruits and vegetables. So over here is our sweet potatoes, and those are simply sweet potatoes out of a can. So I don't want you to feel like you're going to feel bad if you got it out of a can. If you've got fresh ones and you're going to peel them and cook them, great. But or if you've made sweet potato or mashed sweet potatoes and they're all ground up or whatever, you can use those as well. But if you've got the fresh ones out of the can, they'll work just fine. You're going to mash them up and use them or run through the food processor, either one. And
the water content, and that doesn't matter from one sweet potato to another.
No,
Okay.
no, I've not found. I'm trying to remember. I think I drained the liquid out. I think I just mashed them as is. I don't think I put the liquid in. But there's a specific amount that you use. But if you've got additional ingredients from your sweet potato mash that's got some sugar or even marshmallows in it, will not hurt the recipe at all. I've used leftovers lots of times, and it turned out fine. If you've really gone heavy on the brown sugar, you might want to back off on the regular sugar in the recipe, but it doesn't seem to hurt as much. Ordinary all-purpose flour, nothing fancy, although you can make this gluten-free, but it won't rise quite so much, and you might need a different leavener than the baking powder. This is the sugar here, raisins, chopped walnuts. This is orange juice here. This is butter, which you cream together with the sugar. This is applesauce. Now you can use sweetened applesauce. Mine is actually homemade unsweetened, but whatever applesauce you have is going to work for this recipe. The spices, which are principally the same spices that go in pumpkin pie, and then salt and the baking powder, which helps to make everything rise. And then a couple of eggs. All of that gets beat up. In this fashion, you're going to put the dry ingredients together and then the liquid ones, which would include the eggs, but leave out the nuts and the raisins. One thing about that people should know about when you put dry ingredients together, a lot of times we stir it for maybe 10 seconds and we think, oh, that's fine. In fact, if you put baking powder and salt and flour into a food processor, it would take a full 30 seconds of pulsing on high for it to be mixed completely and thoroughly. So if you're just going to whisk it by hand on your own, you want to make sure you whisk it gently with your whisk in a big bowl so you don't make a mess, and do it for at least a minute. And so you'll get a really thoroughly blended dry ingredients. And I do that every time I make cookies, anytime I make any kind of recipe that involves dry ingredients being whisked together, including spices. I whisk it for a very, very long time before I add it to the wet ingredients, or the other way around, either one.
Does it matter which way you add them? Because when I'm baking, and sometimes it says add the dry to the wet, or vice versa.
You know what? I got to admit, I'm more likely to put dry into wet just because it's easier to beat the wet things in the mixer, in the electric mixer first. And a lot of times they call you to, cream the eggs and the sugar together first. And so the dry is obviously going to go in. So yeah, generally it's better to put dry into wet than wet into dry. Although, you know what? If you're making pancakes at home from a mix, probably doesn't make a whole lot of difference. Okay, so you don't want to be too fussy about these things. But in this case, yes, dry into wet is going to be better. A lot of times you'll put about half the dry ingredient in, whisk it together a little bit, and then put the rest in. When you mix it, if you look at this carefully, you'll see that I did not mix this all the way. There's still some flour left. I have not mixed it all the way. And then I start folding in the nuts and the raisins. That's because you don't want to overbeat any kind of batter bread. Just like waffles, you don't want to overbeat. They can be chewy or tough. Biscuits, you don't want to knead too much. Same thing with any one of these breads. You want to make sure that you don't overbeat. So you're going to mix the ingredients until they're just blended and smooth. And so in order to keep from overbeating it, I usually add the nuts and the raisins before everything's quite come together, so that the mixing action of mixing in the goodies, the nuts and the raisins, doesn't overbeat the dough. And I like to make this in small pans. The recipe that you will get will show you how to do it in small pans or in a single large 8.5 by 4.5 by 2.5 pan, or 9 by 5 loaf pan, either one, because the baking time will be different otherwise. But I like doing them in smaller increments so that you have some to give away. I'm always a little bit bothered. I try not to let it come out in what my response is, but when people say, well, it's just me and my husband, or, there's just two of us at the home, and so, can I cut this recipe in half? And I'm like, do you have no friends? I mean, like, do you have relatives that you can be sharing your recipe with? Make the whole recipe, put 2 in the freezer, whatever, it'll be okay. Just go ahead and be bountiful and be generous. I often tell my friends that they can expect to get a random loaf of kindness every once in a while, as opposed to, or as my one friend says, I'm a victim of a drive-by breading, because I drop bread off at his house.
That is wonderful advice. Yeah, thank you. That attitude is great.
Especially this time of year, and especially with COVID isolation, man, do we need that. We need that very badly. And I should like to say the CDC makes it clear that if you follow ordinary precautions in your kitchen with washing your hands and countertops and so forth, sharing food is not a danger, okay? It's no more dangerous than any other season. Just as long as you're using the usual precautions about cleanliness in your kitchen, Sharing food is not a way of becoming a spreader of COVID. Okay, so that's in every article I've read has said that same thing. So just to keep that in mind. Here it is on in its glory on the table, as it were. And like I said, Kwanzaa tables are always just beautifully decorated. There's just stuff on the tables with fruits and vegetables and all kinds of different colors. Sometimes they're Christmassy, sometimes they look more fall, but that's a tradition for Kwanzaa, certainly. Notice here, I have whipped the butter up a little bit so it's soft, but not, I haven't whipped it all the way to like, soft as whipped products come in the store, because I do like for it to spread easily. So I get it out a little early and then kind of whip it up a little bit. Sometimes I'll even shape it a little bit with the spoon. So that's part of the presentation. Remember, we eat with our eyes first. So this is the kind of thing that you would see this on the table and you would really want to reach out and get a piece of that. So,
Couple comments.
okay, yeah, please.
Amanda says, hi from Lisa's friend.
Oh. Hello, Amanda. Thank you. I'll see you on Facebook.
And then Barb from Washington says, I love the thought of sharing baked goods with friends this year. Thank you.
Yes, well, and we just all need to be doing it. I do it all the time. I mean, and let me tell you, I'm going to tell a little story. This is an encouraging story, okay? I recently shared some baked goods with a friend of mine. Just randomly called him and said, hey, come get some baked goods, okay? Which he did. And then this person very graciously then gave me a donation so that I could help needy families in the holiday season. And so that what happens? We give bread away, and what happens? We generate generosity in other people, and they feel they want to do something generous as well. And so that's just a really positive thing for all of us, that the more generosity that we can show is the way that we spread that in the world. So, which is certainly what every holiday, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, Christmas, all of those things are meant to be about, bringing people together in unity and spreading joy. That's exactly what you do every time you bake. And I say this all the time. Companion, the word companion is kum panum, with bread. Our companions on the journey are the people we break bread with. Bread brings people together. When you say company is coming, cum panum, I'm going to break bread. Okay, so this is the season when we should all be doing that. Okay, and I got recipes galore, let me tell you. All right, let's move on. Oh, go ahead, Nelson, you got another question?
Nope, that's it for now.
Okay, good. Let's move on to Christmas showpieces. That beauty right there is actually for Epiphany. Okay, that is a real traditional king cake. Okay, not those awful things with colored sugar with a baby hidden inside. Don't get me started on that. This is instead a more traditional one. This will be one of our later recipes. Okay, but I want to look at some recipes that you can put in the center of your holiday table, and it's going to be the showstopper. It's going to be the attention getter, the one where you really show your family or your friends that you're a baking powerhouse, and you're going to show them the love. Okay, so this almond spiral is a real family favorite, and I learned this about the almond filling that you use for this. I had never used before until I was in Sacramento, California, giving out prizes at the state fair. They had a baking contest at the state fair, and I was giving out the prizes, and a lady made a coffee cake with this almond filling. I wanted to take it home. I would take it on the plane with me. So I was really happy to learn about this, and so I incorporated it into this particular recipe. Okay, so you're going to use a basic sweet dough, and that recipe is going to be on my website. You'll be able to use it. A basic sweet dough. You're going to warm up the almond filling a little bit, and you'll see there's solo almond filling. It's in the same place as the pie filling, and you spread it on your dough and roll it up as if you're going to make cinnamon rolls. But you cut it in half, so you get a couple of half pipes. Okay, and as you see, I didn't cut very evenly right in there, but you do cut it in half. So that you get these two half pipes, and then you just simply spiral them together. So you put one spiral side up, and turn it into a little curly Q, and then the open side up again and finish the spiral, and then you let it rise and bake it, and then it gets a little bit, and notice this is a 16-inch pizza pan, so you can see this is a big 12-inch cake. And then you drizzle on a little bit of filling, a little bit of icing and some toasted almonds. And this is one of those things that, it does look like a giant Danish. It is one of those things that because, and there's a somewhat heavier frosting on that one, also with the toasted almonds. What's nice about this is that because it's this little spiral, you kind of pull pieces off of it all day. Like it sits on the counter and you walk past, then you peel off another little piece, and then it kind of comes out, the spiral kind of comes apart. You can cut it in wedges and it looks lovely when you do. But it also has kind of that nibble quality to it as well. There's a version that's made with cinnamon sugar and then toasted pecans instead. So you can make it with a different filling. If you're saying, for example, if you're allergic to tree nuts, you could do it without any kind of nuts at all and just do a fruit or cinnamon sugar filling. Fruit's a little trickier. That's a little harder to do because the filling is a little runnier, but it is possible. So next recipe, chocolate babka.
Couple of comments here before we move on.
Sure.
Chris says she had forgotten about that recipe. Might have to make it this weekend.
Excellent.
Shelley goes back to a comment that you made earlier that I'm glad to hear you say a home kitchen is safe for baking and sharing. It has been a concern of mine.
Yeah, that's why I brought it up, because a lot of people have asked me, is it safe for me to do my holiday baking? I give away cookies for Christmas. I give away breads for Christmas. As long as you maintain really careful kitchen cleanliness in terms of washing your hands, cleaning countertops, not allowing cross-contamination, using fresh ingredients, all those kinds of things, cooling everything carefully, wrapping it carefully, all of those things will contribute. Now, sometimes when I am baking, like for example, right now, I have a Band-Aid on one finger because I cut myself on a bandsaw. And so like I'll put gloves on while I'm shaping dough, which is a little awkward, just because it's a raw product and I'm using my hands. But for the most part, if your hands have been carefully sanitized before you begin working, you're not in any danger.
And Pat sort of piggybacks on that, and she says, thank you for sharing that it's safe. She loves to bake and giving it to friends, but since the quarantine, she hasn't been doing it, and she knows she can do it.
Of course, we are concerned about those things. We want it, but we still want to show love. We don't want to be disconnected. Okay?
And Barb has a specific question for you, and it's how do you exchange with cinnamon tree nut allergy? How do you exchange
I don't know what. Is she saying that cinnamon is like a tree nut and therefore it will cause an allergy? I was not aware of that.
I guess so. Yeah, I'm not aware of it either, but yeah.
I was concerned about. I'm more concerned.
Can he repeat how to go over how to exchange with cinnamon?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah.
So instead of using the almond filling, okay, you would not want to use that because it's a tree nut. And without using pecans on the top or almonds on the top, you could use any cinnamon roll recipe and simply cut the roll in half as you do, as I showed in the demonstration here. Okay, so that could be a cinnamon roll recipe right there. Your ordinary cinnamon rolls with the butter and the brown sugar and the cinnamon, and then cut it in half and do that same kind of spiral. Your filling is just different. Now, the almond makes it stick together easily, and it might be a little harder to manage with cinnamon sugar. So you might have a little trouble wrangling it. But if you're careful, you can probably make it work. Because as I said, that one was made with a brown sugar cinnamon center, okay, or filling. So it is possible to do it, okay? But it's basically swapping out the almond filling with the same filling that you would put in your favorite cinnamon roll recipe, okay? But without the pecans on top. Okay, and I do recommend that when you're doing fillings with cinnamon, that you do use a little butter and a little bit of brown sugar, so there's a kind of caramelized center in addition to the cinnamon. It definitely makes a difference in the flavor.
Barb says, "Great, thanks."
Okay, excellent. So babka can be made the exact same way, or it can be made in individual rolls. So you could roll out your long, thin sections of dough and spread on your chocolate filling. Now, the chocolate filling that I'm using right here is Jif salted caramel chocolate spread. And let me tell you, it will practically put an indelible mark on your soul. It is one of the most delicious things I've ever eaten in my life. And whatever little left it might be left over, you can definitely spread on anything you want, and it will make it more delicious. But basically, this is one of those things that comes in a little plastic or glass jar, usually plastic. And you'll want to pop it in the microwave for about 10 to 15 seconds, no more, so that it softens up a little bit and can be spread easily. Notice that I have used here a spreader spatula like you use for frosting cakes more professionally. That's worth investing in one of those. It makes things a lot easier. But you'll roll this up into two rolls, two long rolls, or do the same process as we did for the almond spiral and twist the two together. Okay, so here, the one that we see here, this chocolate babka one here, you can see I twisted it together from two open half pipes as opposed to two closed ones. Some people will do it as a closed roll, and so the top is very smooth. I like seeing this kind of open look with the layers because of all those beautiful layers of chocolate. It's kind of nice when it's exposed. But you basically twist it together like you're twisting together like a twisted donut of some kind, and then lay it in the bundt pan. And they're always made in a bundt pan because they're supposed to imitate, babka is supposed to imitate the fluted skirt that a grandmother would wear, a fluted petticoat that a grandmother would wear. That's why it has the name babka. And so there were not such pans in this country, and that's the reason why bundt pans were invented in the United States and became popular, was because these immigrants from Eastern Europe couldn't find the right pans to make their holiday dishes. And they went to the Nordic ware people and said, hey, help us out. And that's why bundt pans became popular in the United States. They really took off when Tunnel of Fudge was introduced in the Pillsbury Bake Off contest. That's when when that Tunnel of Fudge recipe was a bundt pan recipe. That if you remember that recipe from the 60s and 70s, that was a very popular one with my family. That was made bundt pans more popular and more common as well. You can do it also with a brown cinnamon, sugar cinnamon filling with butter and so forth. Both those recipes are going to be available online. You can put, as you can see, a streusel in the bottom of the pan or on the top of the pan, either one, to create a streusel topping. I don't think that's necessary. I think it's got plenty of sweetness on its own, but you will see a streusel topping on some babkas. Okay. Any questions there, Nelson? Are we good?
I think we're good. No questions on this so far.
Excellent. This is Hoska, also called Huska or Hoska. There's lots of different pronunciations. It's Czechoslovakian, and it's a braided loaf. It's got dried fruits in it. Now, a lot of people like this and other Christmas breads using the kind of fruits that go in fruitcake. And I don't particularly care for that flavor profile. So as you can see here, I've used candied pineapple, which I think is a little fresher and doesn't remind people of fruitcake if you don't like that, which I do not. But you can use any kind of dried fruit you want. You can use craisins, you can use raisins, you could use dried mango. You can use any number of things. Traditionally, it has some kind of dried fruit in it to make a hushka. And it's a rich dough with a lot of eggs and sugar in it. And it is braided. Now, some people are kind of freaked out by braiding. So I'm going to give you a little hint here. You don't have to roll out 3 ropes perfectly even, exactly weighed out. You could roll your dough out in a fat oval, as you can see here. Take a pizza cutter and make 2 parallel cuts to make evenly spaced strips and braid that. And you'll get a braided loaf that looks like it was done by a professional. It's the easiest thing in the world. There's nothing to it. And if you look on I have my own YouTube channel. So if you enter the Bread Monk in a YouTube search, you will find that I have an instruction video. It's 1 minute long that shows you how to do what's called a slab braid. Okay. It is the greatest thing in the world. If you're not good with manipulating dough, this will make you look like a professional. Like I've done this with 10-year-olds, and it looks like it's something that could go on the cover of Food and Wine magazine. It's a great little tip. So definitely.
Oh, and I don't think I've ever seen that demonstrated before.
Because I made it up. I have never seen it anywhere. The first time I did it, I thought, have I seen this somewhere? Am I making this up like right now? I think I'm making this up right now. But it's a slab braid. You can use it for challah. Now, challah traditionally is a 6-strand braid because you've got 2 loaves for the 12 tribes of Israel. But you could certainly do a 3-strand braid for challah or any braided loaf, even basic white or basic wheat. If you braid it, brush the top with a little beaten egg and sprinkle on sesame seeds, all of a sudden it's a holiday bread. All of a sudden it looks really fancy. And any of your yeasted doughs can be made in a beautiful braid like this. So definitely you want to give this a try. Notice that I didn't cut all the way through at the top. It stays connected at the top, and then you just braid it left over right. Also notice, however, that you don't flip the strands over. You keep the same side facing up. Okay, so the side that's facing up is the side that stays facing up the whole time. Otherwise, you won't get a smooth product. Okay, that's just a little hint so that you pay attention while you're doing it. Okay.
Very good.
So let's look at another recipe that is related to Hoska, and that is Stollen. And that is the German bread, which is very often a yeasted bread with fruits on the inside, with candied fruits on the inside. But it has a different shape, and that is it's folded over. You can see that it's rolled out into a big fat oval. Melted butter is spread on the top, and then it's folded over, not quite all the way. That's supposed to imitate the baby Jesus wrapped in the swaddling clothes. Okay, so it's like you're wrapping up the baby, okay, in this dough. And a friend of mine many years ago, she's passed away now, God bless her soul, but she said when she was little, her mom would tell her, she wanted to help, and her mom said, well, I will let you wrap up the baby Jesus. And she said, before you wrap the dough up, before you fold the dough over, you lean down and you whisper all your hopes and dreams and a prayer for the family, and you wrap it up with the Christ child. And so that was the tradition in her family, is that you the youngest one would wrap up the family's desires and wishes and hopes for the coming new year, which I just think is really charming to kind of get a child involved in such a fashion. This one, I used the kind of fruits that go in fruit cake, because I happen to have that in the house, which make a nice garnish on the top as well. What we're seeing here, however, is not a yeasted Stollen, which is going to take you about 5 hours. This is a biscuit Stollen. So it uses a dough more like a biscuit dough with baking powder and baking soda as the leavener. And you do the same folded over shape, but the consistency is more like a biscuit or a batter bread than it is like a yeasted dough. What you'll get here is something very, I think is what's usually are sometimes called a Dresden Stollen, which are usually made with raisins. But it does look beautiful, and it's got a great texture on the inside. You can use nuts with it as well, or leave the nuts out. Traditionally, it uses slivered almonds, but and I got my recipe from our father Arthur's mother. He was German. His mother was German, and when I came to the monastery, I knew that I had become a full member of the community when people started leaving recipes in my mailbox and saying, my mom used to make this at Christmas. Will you please make this? Because I miss it. And so they're like, okay, they appreciate the whole baking thing. So I would start making these recipes that people missed from their childhood. And I actually called Mrs. Schmidt and got her advice on how to do this properly. So it is a very, when you do it as a yeasted dough, it's rich and it takes a long time to rise, and it's kind of a soft dough that's a little harder to manipulate, but man, is it lovely. Keeps for
It should be appreciated in this town. We do have quite a few people of German heritage out here.
There you go. You want to find that recipe then and try one out because they really are yummy. And again, they look beautiful on the table. They just look gorgeous on the table. It's the thing your eye goes to immediately. Okay, so once Christmas is over with and we get to Epiphany, you might want to make a king cake, okay? Now, this is called Bolo Rei, or buhei is the dialect way of saying it. It's a Portuguese bread. It's got a very rich dough. Again, lots of eggs, lots of sugar. It's a whole stick of butter in this thing. And you make this rich dough, and it's got dried fruits. I love it with dried apricots. Oh my gosh, this is kind of my thing for this, is dried apricots, or sometimes even the orange, like orange marmalade, or dried rinds and things like candied rinds and that sort of thing. But you flour a couple fingers. If you can see, I put a flour on my fingers, and you push it down in the middle of the dough, and you start to open it up little by little until you get a ring. So you got to do this very slowly and carefully until you get yourself a ring, and you put it on the table. Now, on the pan to bake. Now, I will say that you can buy stoneware ring pans, and you can even put one of these in a Jello mold if you have to. But it's kind of nice to do it the traditional way, where you open it up and roll it out like that. It's very satisfying, and it's kind of fun to manipulate the dough in that fashion. And I found it wasn't hard. I didn't have any trouble with it the first time I made it, so I recommend that people should give it a shot. It does take a long time to rise because it's a really rich dough, and you'll think like it's not working, but be patient with it. Be patient with it. Okay. And when you're finished, I mix apricot preserves and orange marmalade with some orange juice in a saucepan and heat it up, and then pour it over as a glaze. And then the candied cherries are supposed to represent the jewels of the king's crown. Okay, this is the idea of one of the crowns of the three kings. That's why it's got the shape with the open centers, because it's supposed to be one of the crowns. And then I think some slivered almonds look nice on it. Those should have been toasted. I don't know why I left them raw like that. But again, it's very dramatic and looks beautiful on the table. But it, again, takes a very long time. If you want to make something special for Epiphany, but you don't want to go to that much trouble, there's a really lovely recipe on my website for a sour cream, orange, dark chocolate bundt cake that is more of a Spanish tradition than Portuguese because of that orange chocolate combination of flavors. Also can be made with almonds or without. And it doesn't take any time at all. It takes no more time than any other, bundt cake recipe, like a coffee cake. And that really is delicious. I made that for the brethren just the other day because I needed a photo, not that photo, but another one. And I just made it because I had the ingredients, and I thought, well, to get a picture for this other project I'm working on, I put a whole bundt cake out, and it lasted like, I don't know, 9 hours maybe. People kept coming back for extra slices. So that's a real crowd pleaser. And your family, if you love that orange chocolate kind of combination of flavors, and you see that on Food Network all the time. You watch those holiday baking things, people are doing that orange chocolate thing as a combination all the time. This has that flavor profile, and it's a winner. It really is. Okay, so that's the end of the PowerPoint. So I'm going to stop the share and come back to the screen and see if anybody has additional baking questions for the holidays of any kind.
So this is our opportunity to anyone to participate in chat there to see if they've got any questions for you.
I have
Robin
a significant amount of knowledge on cookies too, so I'm happy to share that as well. My mother was a cookie queen, so I got it going on.
Robin says cinnamon babka, and then she puts an emoji that looks like.
That's a whole Seinfeld episode about babka, chocolate and vodka and so forth. I did not know that was until I made it and put it online, and then people kept making all these Seinfeld references, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So, being a monk, I'm not into there's a lot of things about popular culture I do know because I teach high school, but a lot of things I don't. Evidently, the Babka episode is one of them.
So can you talk about the difference between using the metal baking sheets versus stone?
Okay. So I have not worked with stoneware baking sheets. I've only used metal baking sheets, okay? But I use a lot of stoneware for other things, certainly for pizza. I have baked on stoneware, like a stoneware pizza stone, and made a variety of rolls and things like that. I've made rolls in a special pan, stoneware pan for that. Every time I make English muffin bread, that goes into stoneware, certainly. The main thing with stoneware is that it takes a little longer to heat up than the metal does. The advantage of that is that then your oven has more opportunity to create oven spring in your yeasted breads, and they poof up more without browning on the bottom so fast. Okay, so there's some advantage there. But stoneware also tends to draw some moisture from the dough as well. And so sometimes stoneware, if your temperature is up too high, your bottom can get a little dark or a little chewy. So there's a certain amount of experimentation between those two. I have made some dinner rolls, which were lovely soft on top, but were a little bit chewy on the bottom because the stoneware had kind of drawn some of that moisture away. So it does require a certain amount of experimentation. And sometimes there's adjustment of your oven temperatures because of it. Now, if you're using a convection oven in particular, you really need to lower your temperature, okay? Because otherwise things are going to brown way, way too fast, and they may not be cooked all the way on the inside. I will say that one of the advantages of stoneware from my standpoint, I feel as though if you have an oven that doesn't cook very evenly, stoneware will fix that faster that will mitigate that far more than a metal pan will. Okay, so if you've got one of those ovens that's a little bit, a little wonky, so it cooks a little hotter in the back or in the front or left side to right side, stoneware, because it heats very evenly, will have a tendency to help mitigate that problem. Most recipes, even in a convection oven, I will still rotate the pans to make sure that things get baked evenly, because I never really trust any oven to bake truly evenly. And so it's always a good idea to rotate your pans. Be careful with stoneware, especially that you not ever put soap on it. Okay, if you clean it, scrape it off, or you use a scrubby or whatever, that's fine. But you don't want to soak it, and you definitely do not want to ever put soap on it because it will absorb that soap and then it'll have that flavor. Okay, if your top of your stoneware starts to get brown and dark, good. It becomes increasingly more non-stick as that happens. Okay, I have stoneware pans now that like the lightest little spray on them, and bread comes out of them instantaneously. Especially like the long, skinny ones. I think those make a great loaf of bread as well. So I'm more likely to use stoneware pans for loaf than I am for the like as a tray sort of thing. So I have more experience with that.
All
I
right.
hope that answers the question.
I think so. And we've got two more. So
Okay.
let me start here with Barb. And she wants to know, how deep should the oil be if she's frying the jelly donuts using a cast iron skillet?
You want to be able to get at least 2 inches. 2.5 is better. So if you've got a lower cast iron skillet, probably not a good choice. Okay. And if you go on Tori Aby's website, which I'm giving you the link to, she gives you more information about that. Okay. But I like, as you can see, I had an electric skillet fryer kind of thing, and it really only had about 3.5 inches of room, and so not quite 4. And I think I put probably 2 inches of oil in it, and that seemed to be plenty. Remember that oil expands when it heats too, so you want to take that into account, and that it will bubble up a little bit as you put the donuts in to fry.
Very good. Thank you. And then Ronald says, I have always wanted to try and make panettone. I think I pronounced that right.
Yes.
Is it difficult, and any tips?
Okay. Panettone, there's 2 things about panettone that make it difficult. One, it is, again, one of those really rich doughs that takes forever to rise. Okay. It just does, because there's so much sugar and so much butter in it, and the eggs and whatever else, that it just takes a long time to rise. The other danger with panettone is that if you're not careful, you'll add too much flour. You'll want that same kind of kneading that you get when you, because panettone is meant to be a yeasted cake thing, okay, as opposed to a batter in its original form, okay. Now you'll find panettone recipes where you get a more liquidy batter, and maybe that's more what you want. The ones that you find in the store are certainly made more with kind of a liquidy batter because they're more cake-like. Traditionally, panettone was made maybe a little bit more closer halfway between cake and bread. I don't know if people know the story behind panettone. It's probably a made-up story, but it is a charming one. Panettone suggests pan de Tony, that is Tony's bread. And the story is that there was a fellow named Tony who was in love with a beautiful woman, and her father didn't approve of him because he was just a poor baker. So he created this beautiful, rich bread with these lovely ingredients on the inside that became so popular. His bakery became successful, and he was allowed to wed his lady love. And so panettone became this famous bread. Probably completely made up, but still the story that I'm going to stick to because I just think it's so charming. But the main thing, like I said, if you're going to make it the yeasted versions, that you don't want to add too much flour. Okay, that's a big thing. And give it lots of time to rise. Don't do it if you're in a hurry. You want to make sure you're going to give it lots and lots of time to rise. I like to make panettone in the Texas muffin tins because I find a little one, for one thing, they rise a little faster, but also they bake a little easier, and it's a little thing that you can give away. And again, it's like a little treat. It's larger than a cupcake, but not so big as a full loaf of bread. And so it's a nice little thing you give to your office mates or your neighbors, a little treat. You tie it up with a little bit of plastic and a bow, and it becomes a charming little present. So I tend to make mine in those Texas muffin tins. But again, not too much flour, lots of rising time is the main way to be successful with it. Lots of recipes out there. Some of them have good instructions, some not. Try to find yourself a real Italian baker.
Yes. Anything else that anyone wants? Any other questions that you have out there?
I'm curious, you've been using the term rich a lot in this presentation. What makes something rich?
Well, additional eggs, sugar, or butter is really, and that's traditional for Christmas and Easter, obviously, that after the Lenten austerities, you can get back to eating the rich foods again. So we tend to make, foods with lots of butter, lots of eggs, lots of sugar at Easter time. At Christmas, the reason that dried fruits are usually the thing is because dried fruits would have been the only thing available in ancient times. And so that became the traditional way to kind of use them up before they spoiled, but also to celebrate the season with this extra sweetness. But richness usually has to do with the dough having butter, sugar, eggs in some combination. That requires more lifting power of your yeast. And sometimes recipes will put additional yeast into a recipe in order to give it more lifting power. A rule of thumb, by the way, if you've got an old recipe from your family that you'd like to make, and it says a cake of yeast, and you're like, I can't find cake yeast anywhere. How do I even make this? This is grandma's wonderful, cinnamon bread or whatever, raisin bread, and I don't know what to do. The rule of thumb is that a package of yeast will raise 4 cups worth of flour in a recipe. So for every 1 package of yeast, 4 cups of flour. So if I look at a recipe and it uses 5.5 to 6 cups of flour, then I know I need 2 packages of yeast to have enough lift for that to work. Okay, so each of those packages, which holds basically 7 grams, 2¼ teaspoons, essentially. Each of those packages, which have an expiration date on the side, you want to make sure you check it. Each of those will raise 4 cups of flour. Now, if you've got a recipe like you have at Christmas time that have a lot of butter, eggs, and sugar, your recipe might have only 5 cups of flour, but 2 packages of yeast. Yeah, buy that. Okay, yes, that's probably true. Because it's so rich, it needs a little lifting power to power through that heaviness of the dough and give yourself a light product, okay? But that's your rule of thumb. If you're translating those old recipes, you just use 4 cups of flour equals 1 package of yeast, and then you'll be able to translate any recipe.
Good. Thank you.
Another question from Barb, who, shifting gears a little bit, is taking us to pizza dough.
Ah,
After
I was just talking about pizza today. As a matter of fact, I'm working on a pizza special for another PBS station out in Sacramento. So
oh,
yeah,
excellent,
let's talk
excellent.
about let's talk about pizza. Absolutely, I'm all ready.
So she wants to know if I'm making pizza dough after it rises once and I roll it out, should I let it rise a second time again? And do I add toppings and then bake, or do you bake it first and then add the toppings?
Okay, those are all excellent questions, right? In my experience, okay, first off, your first rise should take place in a refrigerator. Okay, I'm a great believer in cool rise for pizza dough over a long period of time. So when I'm going to make pizza, let's say I'm going to have kids over, my stage rats are going to come over. I've got a high school club, and we're going to do pizza, say at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. I will make my dough at noon, 2 in the afternoon, put it in the refrigerator, and give it a long, slow rise in the refrigerator. And then pull it out about an hour before I'm going to use it and let it come to room temp. And
Why is that
then,
important?
because that long, slow rise creates additional texture and flavor in the dough. You'll be amazed at the difference it makes. It's astonishing. And you know what? Almost every pizza joint you'll ever find makes their dough the day before and lets it rise in the refrigerator. And that's one of the reasons why it has great texture and great flavor, is because that long, slow rise makes a huge difference. The other thing is that when you roll the dough out, you're better off actually not rolling the dough out, but stretching the dough out with your hands so those air pockets don't get deflated. It's nicer if you can leave some of those bigger pockets in there. You know how you get that kind of poofage and the top even gets a little char on it? That's a nice looking pizza. If you roll it out by hand, it's okay. If you don't want to stretch it by your hands, you want to use a rolling pin. But try not to completely degas it, because you want to have some of that poofage, okay? I will say that when I make pizzas, I tend to roll them out and form the outer dam crust, if you know what I mean, the kind of little dam that's going to hold the sauce. And then I let them set for a few minutes before I start putting toppings on. But it's never more than about 3 or 4 minutes. Okay, so it's not necessary to do a full half-hour rise. You're going to get something that's more like bread, which is not really what you want. Okay, you want a pizza dough that's tender on the inside, but still has some heft to the crust. So I have a tendency to roll my stuff out, let it sit maybe for 2 or 3 minutes at the most, and then put my sauces and everything on, and then into the oven. Yes, and you do not pre-bake the crust. You do not pre-bake the crust unless there's one difference. If you have an oven that has a blower on it that won't turn off, and some commercial ovens are like this. Okay, the oven that I work in our school kitchen has a blower on it that will not turn off. Okay, it's not a roasting oven; it's got a blower on it. So I will par-bake the crust part way, and then put my toppings on, and then put it in for the rest of the bake, because otherwise the cheese burns by the time the crust is cooked because of the blower. Okay, so that's the only time that I will par-bake something before I'm going to make pizza fresh. You can take any pizza dough recipe, roll your dough out, give it that 2 or 3 minute rest, give it a little spray with some olive oil or something, and then put it in the oven at 350 and par-bake it for about 7 minutes and pull it out, let it cool completely, and you can wrap that up as a frozen crust, and you've got your homemade DiGiorno. You know, I mean, it's ready to go in the freezer, and you can pull it out when you need it. Okay, so par-baking crusts is a thing. You can do it. I do it all the time. But as a general rule, I'm putting things in the oven at about 500 degrees, so that additional second rise is unnecessary, because the heat of the oven is given in that big spring. Okay.
Very good.
I can talk about pizza a long time, believe me. Okay.
Well, that's Pop or my house. That's all my son makes. He makes pizza.
Oh,
After pizza.
I have no idea.
He wants to eat dinner with us. He wants to make his own pizzas.
I made a pizza this year. Was it this year or last year? I guess it was, for the first time, that I call Piggy in the Vineyard. and it's got a sherry cream sauce, chopped ham, shallots or onions or green onions or chives or something like that, black olives, and then grape halves, red grape halves, seedless grapes over the top, smoked Gouda over that, and in the oven. And when it comes out, you drizzle it with honey and sprinkle it with fresh thyme. Oh my Lord. It's like sweet, salty, creamy, crunchy, all of it like at once. It is one of the most delicious things I've ever made in my life. And now I'm so sorry I even brought that up. Now I'm hungry.
That sounds amazing. You have the recipe out there like that?
Not yet. That's the thing. That's why I'm doing the new pizza book, is because I need to get this.
Good.
I need to get this out there. It might be. I might have it online. I can't remember if it's on there. If you put in Piggy in the Vineyard in a search engine, you might find it. But I think it might be on the website. I'm not sure. Which is breadmonk.com. Go there and you might be able to find it, because I have lots of pizza recipes there. But that is really one of my favorite flavor combinations ever. So, by the way, Barb
says
we're talking
thanks.
about
Her
pizza.
kids are excited for her to try it that way.
Excellent. Well, before I get off on this with this question of pizza for Barb, don't be afraid to experiment with other cheeses. I make an Italian beef pizza that uses sliced provolone on the top. I make recipes where I'll use a smoked mozzarella instead of regular mozzarella. I like using manchego with a chicken pizza. So don't be afraid to use other cheeses, just to be aware. They won't brown as much very often as mozzarella, if that's your thing, to have the pizza cheese brown a little bit. That's how I prefer it. But you'll get this kind of nice melty kind of thing. And very often that could be the difference. I'll put like some special cheese, like really sharp cheddar or the smoked Gouda or something on the bottom layer with the sauce, put the toppings on that, and then a light level of mozzarella over that. And then again, it's got that layers of flavor, and people are like, oh, what is that? It's not like I usually get. So don't be afraid to experiment with those kinds of things. You'll be glad you did. You'll be glad you did.
Do you use high gluten flour for your pizzas?
Occasionally.
Sir Lancelot, or Trumps, or Sir Lancelot? That's another question from.
No, I don't use those particular brands, only because I keep gluten powder in my pantry all the time, and I take all-purpose and I add the gluten to it. Okay, so if I'm making pizza dough, most often I'm going to make a batch of dough that's going to make let's say three 12 to 16 inch pizzas. Okay, that amount is what I usually make. Okay. I'm going to put in one, maybe two, depending upon the sturdiness of the pizza I'm going to make. But I'll put at least 1 tablespoon of vital wheat gluten, so that I amp up the protein in the pizza dough. You can use certainly bread flour for pizza dough, and that's a great thing to do. But because I don't like having to keep 2 different kinds of flour in the kitchen, I like just all-purpose flour. And then I'll add the gluten powder to it to kind of ramp up that protein level, and it essentially becomes bread flour. Okay, so it's a way also to kind of economize a little bit. Some of those bread flours are a little more expensive. A little bit of gluten powder just gives you the exact same effect. Okay.
Very good, thank you. Well, do you want to? Here's a question from Karen, who says, well, actually, no, let me do Robin's first. She was first. And she just wants to know, do you have a favorite holiday bread that you make for Christmas?
Ooh, wow. Okay, I would say that really my favorite holiday bread is just to make really good dinner rolls. That's the thing that the community really wants, is a really good dinner roll. And so there's a recipe on my website. It's called Best Ever Crescent Rolls. Okay, that particular recipe, Best Ever Crescent Rolls. You'll find it as a drop-down menu, or it says recipes. A drop-down menu will come down and it'll say Best Ever Crescent Rolls. Click on that. That is the one the brethren want. Like if I ask people, what do you want? You want this? You want that? No, we want those crescent roll things you make. It's just their favorite. And so that, I would say, that's really my favorite holiday bread. And I will make pans and pans and pans of buns and crescent rolls and various kinds of rolls. at Christmas and Easter and Thanksgiving and give them away to friends. And because that to me is just like the best part of a meal is sopping up the gravy, really. And
Yeah.
so to me, that's more important than just about anything else. Now, I will make lots of other kinds of breads.
And I
I'll tell
know
you
that crescent roll recipe is in one of your earlier cookbooks because we have a copy of that at the Washington Public Library. So I know I saw
Yes,
that
it's
recipe.
it's also in the Breadhead Bible. You'll find
Yep,
it in the Breadhead
that's the
Bible.
one that we have
Yeah.
in the library.
Yeah, that is in the Breadhead Bible, definitely. But if you don't have that book, you can find it on the website. If you're interested in purchasing some of those books, there will be a link on the page that I give you, where you can look on our Monk's Market website, which is our Abby's retail market. You can look at my cookbooks. I've got a Christmas cookbook out, which includes a panettone recipe, young man. But there will be if you want to check that recipe book out as well, that's available with a lot of these recipes we've been talking about, but many of them are available online as well.
And I do want to point out that Neighborhood Reads is also a sponsor of this, and they do have your newest book on the bookshelf.
Yes, they have
There.
that. Baking Your Way Through the Holidays is available at Neighborhood Reads. I know they do. I know they have it there because it's been selling rather briskly. Thank you very much.
I was there this afternoon. There are a few copies left, so
Good.
everyone hurry up and get out there. Socially distanced, of course.
The recipe, by the way, that recipe book, one of the things I love about it is that it includes my Grandma Gomi's. We called her Grandma Gomi instead of Garamoni because when we were little we couldn't pronounce that, our own last name. Her cinnamon roll recipe, which is just a champ, and then my mother's sugar cookies are in there as well. And that's if you like a sugar cookie that's
Okay.
crisp,
So
you'll want to go.
We're going to segue right here then, because Karen's question is the last one I've got so far, and it says,
Okay.
do you have a good sugar cookie recipe?
Yeah, and that is available in the cookbook, and I want to say I think it's online too. I think it's under Mama's Sugar Cookies. I'm not sure. I think so. But it is that is a recipe that's online. The big thing with my mom's sugar cookies, she always used cake flour. That's one of the flours I do keep around. She used cake flour instead of regular flour. She always rolled it out with powdered sugar instead of flour. So there was this thin layer of sugar on the top and bottom when she rolled it out. And it's almost like you don't even need frosting. It's got this little kind of tiny glaze on the top. So good. And then she always used almond extract instead of vanilla. And those three things create what I think are like the perfect, because it's my mom's, the perfect Christmas cookie.
Yes.
And they're sturdy enough that they can take frosting without breaking. You can make larger cookies with them. I hold it up to anybody's. But yeah, that's my mama's sugar cookie recipe. And it's a family favorite. I have, by the way, a cookie cutter of a monk because Robin Hood flour in the 70s had a cookie cutter in every bag of flour as a promotion, and one of them was Friar Tuck. So I have a Friar Tuck cookie cutter, but instead of making him a Franciscan, I sprinkle on the black sugar left over from Halloween and turn him into a Benedictine. So I have little monk cookies. I have little monk cookies with a black robe for Benedictines at Christmas time every year. So that's a family favorite as well too.
That sounds wonderful. I'll tell you this is what I experimented with yesterday. I made cookies for my daughter who did a walkathon at school today. And I made chocolate chip cookies, and I'd never done it this way before, but I melted the butter. And I browned it for about 3 minutes till it got kind of golden brown.
Yeah.
And then dissolved the sugar into that.
Yeah.
And did a lot of whisking, and that gave the cookies such an amazingly rich caramel flavor.
Whole different character, doesn't it? It's like a whole different depth of flavor. You make blondies that way, and honest to goodness, the pan doesn't last 20 minutes. That browned butter kind of thing is becoming more popular. That's one of those things that people are starting to get into a little bit more. Another hint that I learned just recently, this past year, I guess earlier, maybe in the summertime, people are putting sweetened condensed milk into their Rice Krispie squares, and they stay chewier longer. And I'm like, really? So look that up online. The recipe's online. It's like maybe a half cup of it added to your regular recipe, And evidently, it's true. I made them that way, and they stayed chewy forever. You know, they can dry out and be kind of nasty after a few days. They stay chewy and sticky just for the longest time. Now, in most families, they don't last that long anyway, but still,
Yeah.
it did make a difference. It did make a difference. So that's another little hint you can look up online.
And Lisa says the recipe for the sugar cookies are on your page. So
Is it?
you
Okay,
Go
good.
there.
Yeah.
Yep. Go there and find it.
See, okay, good. I thought I had shared that. I couldn't remember. After, I've been doing the website for so many years, I can't remember things that I've shared. Sometimes I've got posts about the same recipe over successive years. So I keep forgetting it's already on there.
Well, are you out of questions, Nelson?
That's the last one I've got. I know there's some technical difficulty, I think, with a few people wanting to leave comments, and we'll figure that out now for the next time we do it. But people in the chat are able.
If people go to my website, there is a place where they can click on it for contact me. I have a specific email address for the website, which I check regularly. So if you have specific questions regarding baking or comments or recipes you want to share or stories or whatever, I'm happy to contact if people want to contact me that way. Or, as I said, I have a Facebook page. It's just Father Dominic the Bread Monk. You can look that up and like that page and send me messages through that as well. And I respond to all those messages. So please feel free to ask questions, ask for recipes, advice, share your successes. I'm happy to see all of them.
Dawn Kitchell says she's one having technical difficulties, and I think I know what they are. But she says, please tell him how much we appreciate him taking the time to do this.
I am so happy to do this. Believe me, I don't get a chance to talk about bread often enough now that I'm not doing these weekend live bread demos various places. So this is a real pleasure for me. And I want to say, as I have said for decades now, all of my culinary information, literally everything I know, I did not go to culinary school. Everything I know about cooking and baking, I learned from PBS, My Mother's Kitchen, and the public library. That's where I learned everything. So I'm a great believer in public libraries, and anything we can do to make people connect to them more, I am in favor of it. So support your local public library.
And I try to make sure that I order lots of cooking books, dessert books, cookies, regular cooking.
That is actually another, when we get to the point where I could do live programs, one of the programs I've done in the library before is to go a couple of days before to a public library and review all of their baking and cooking books, and then make suggestions about which ones are really good, which ones maybe need replacing, and what ones you ought to purchase. And we do a program about it where people can say, oh, I'll buy that book for the library, or, oh, I want to take that book out now. So I'm a great believer in using the library as a resource. When I did my TV show, I didn't buy all those cookbooks. I went to the library, Well, I borrowed a lot of them from my mom. She was such a great baker. But a lot of the research I did, I went to public libraries whenever I was in a different town. I'd take an hour, go to public library, find recipes, copy things, So I'm a great believer in using it as a resource for culinary stuff. The internet has a lot, but there's something pleasant about paging through and finding that beautiful photo and the tactile nature of a book. I find great pleasure. So
right, and it's easy to find the recipe, open it up, and just plop it down next to the stove and get it splattered a little bit.
You know what? I have an awful lot of cookbooks that you can tell which recipes are used the most because the pages are filthy.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. This has just been delightful. My mouth is watering.
Yeah, it's like I actually skipped supper so that I could be here on time. I'm like, I need a toast. I don't know, a bagel, something.
Well, we look forward to having you back sometime. So
I sure hope we can make that happen. Once again, thanks for hosting me, and thank you everybody who tuned in. And have a blessed holiday season, whatever it is you're celebrating, and make sure you break bread with somebody.
Thank you.
And we had close to 40 at the most watching at one time tonight, so we had a pretty good audience. So
and you'll probably get plenty more watching the archive thing too. So
yeah,
that's super.
Good.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, God bless.
Good night.